students, welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. I'm still your literature teacher, and today we want to look at a non-African novel titled Invisible Man.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
Our focus for this novel will be the characters in Invisible Man. Characters in Invisible Man. Okay, so at the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify and describe the major characters in the novel. You'll be able to share opinions on their significance, and you'll be able to apply the lessons learned from characters in your daily life. Okay, so let's look at the very first character we have here. So the first we have is the narrator. The narrator. The nameless protagonist of the novel. Okay, the narrator is the Invisible Man himself, just as the title of the novel. And this makes him, in a way, an eponymous character because he is the Invisible Man. In fact, in the very first page of the text, we see that the narrator declares himself. He says, I am an invisible man. Not because I cannot be seen, but because others have refused to see me. So here, he calls himself an invisible man, has obviously resigned to fate that he is indeed invisible. He's a black man in the 1930s America. And the narrator considers himself invisible because people never see his true self beneath the roles that racial prejudice compel him to play. He's intelligent, he's deeply introspective, and highly gifted with language. At a point in time when he joins the Brotherhood, in fact, the main reason he was begged to join the Brotherhood was that he delivered a speech and he spoke on behalf of the people in Harlem, the main setting for the text in the South side. You know, the text has two major settings. We have the South and the North America. Okay, so in the South side of America, where we have a lot of black men or black Americans, is where the narrator came from. Okay, and he, at a point when they went through a royal rumble, and I'm sure you have read the text, and he was asked to speak. He spoke so powerfully and so boldly, and he was identified by some of the leaders of the Brotherhood, and he was begged to join the Brotherhood because he would be a very good asset for the Brotherhood group. Okay, so he's a very good speaker, very intelligent, highly gifted with language. Of course, he had this tough moment which leads him into his hole. Now, it's important for you to know that the whole story was told using a sort of in media res. Everything that you see in the story was a flashback. The narrator tells the story of the Invisible Man from his hole, his underground hole, the hole where he hides himself and hilariously burns 1,369 bulbs because he has freedom and free access to the country's electricity. Okay, and then he does that just to please himself, just to have fun. Okay, he tells all the story from that hole. Now, he began to explain how he got into the hole in the first place. That's how we have the whole story of the Invisible Man. Okay, and he explains how that, first of all, he was subjected to a rumble match where it was surrounded by a cage of barbed wires with electricity in them, and whoever wins gets a title and gets to study at the college, the black college in the north. All right, and fortunately, he was blessed to have that opportunity. but he thought that was the end of his struggles. By the time he got into the black college, he started to face another level of racial discrimination. Even though the president of the black college, Mr. Bledsoe, was black, he still treated everyone there as though they were a second-class person. He treated them as nothing, as, you know, as nuisance, just because he wanted the white men to feel that he's on their side. He wanted the white men to feel that he's true and devoted to their legacies, okay? And then we saw how he drove Mr. Nothing around and gets into trouble because he took him to a place infested with angry black men, one of which is the veteran. You know, Mr. Nothing could not manage the crisis there, so he passed out, and he was the narrator was scolded seriously for it. As a matter of fact, it was a lifelong punishment because Mr. Bledsoe wrote a letter to dismiss him from the college or graduate him early from the college, and in the letter was a blasphemous content, you know, to make sure that he doesn't get a job anywhere he finds himself. And it didn't take long before the narrator came to the awareness that there is no, even the blacks discriminate against one another. So there's so much discrimination as a theme in this text. All right. We also find out that after he leaves the black college, he tries to get a job in a particular paint factory. And Mr. Brussels was quite, you know, good and accommodating, even though he still has his own racist ideas. Not until we met a man called Lucius Brockway, the man who is seriously angry at the narrator's success at the paint factory. And then he organized to make sure that he was, you know, he had an accident, serious accident, and this ended his paint factory journey. And then we saw how that he also got into the Brotherhood and began another level of discrimination. The brothers there loves the way he talks, loves the way he speaks. But just when he was about to assert his own difference as a black man and in favor of the black people, we saw that immediately there was a revolt. All the brothers gathered and began to say that he should not have talked that way. He should not have spoken that way. And that's just because he was trying to say the truth. And then he began to see that, no, even some of the brothers there do not really portray or do not really stand for what they claim to. All right. Now let's look at another character, which is Brother Jack. Brother Jack, the white and blindly loyal leader of the Brotherhood, a political organization that professes to defend the rights of the socially oppressed. Now, although he initially seems compassionate, intelligent, and kind, and he claims to uphold the rights of the socially oppressed, Brother Jack actually possesses racist viewpoints and is unable to see people as anything other than tools. His glass eye and his red hair symbolizes his blindness and his communism, respectively. At first, just like I said earlier, when Brother Jack identified the goodness in the narrator, especially when he delivered this speech, he thought that, wow, he's going to be a very good instrument for the Brotherhood to help advance the Brotherhood ideas and objectives. But on the long run, we saw how he was not truly and really in favor of the blacks, which they claim to defend or to be supporting. And that's because some way, somehow, the agenda of the whites too are fake and not realistic as they are portrayed. Okay? That's still because of the racial segregation that is still rampant in the American society. And then we have another character, Todd Clifton, a black member of the Brotherhood and a resident of Harlem. Todd Clifton is a passionate and handsome, articulate, and intelligent man. He eventually parts ways with the Brotherhood, though it remains unclear whether falling out has taken place or whether he has simply become disillusioned with the group. He begins selling Sambo dolls on the street, seemingly both perpetrating and mocking the offensive stereotype of the lazy and servile slave that the dolls represent. Don't forget that Todd Clifton was from the south side of America, and that's Harlem, and his idea had always remained with him. From the conversation of the novelist, he expressed that Todd Clifton had always wondered and thought within himself how that the blacks could be rescued from the hands of those who have oppressed them using the oppressors themselves. So, for finding himself in the Brotherhood, he thought first that it was a loyal ambition. He thought that they were true with what they professed to be. But along the line, he discovers that they were not really what they stood for. At a point in time, a particular character, Ras the Exhorter, challenged him and said that you are selling your people, that you only sell them off. That challenge struck something inside him, and he thought that truly, am I selling my people? Is that true? And he felt that in a way it is true, because he is on the side of the people who are not true with the ideas to support the blacks, only put on a charade. And now he decides to do something that people cannot still understand. He breaks away from the Brotherhood. He did not declare officially that he was no longer part of the Brotherhood, but he left and started to sell Sambo dolls. Dolls that are also symbolic to the story. He started selling them and on the streets openly without fear. He's one of the very frank and straightforward persons in the Brotherhood, or characters in the Brotherhood and in the entire novel. And he was challenged severally why he was doing that, but he did not speak up for any just cause. He just decided to sell Sambo dolls. It's important for you to know that the Sambo dolls is symbolic, or the Sambo doll is symbolic of what the black people working for the whites or working for the Americans are being made to become. Now, just like in every American society, even now we have the Jackpot issues or Jackpot syndrome, where people want to just go and work for the white men. And then by the time they get there, they feel very proud. They take pictures, they are happy that they are serving and working for the white men. But in this case, Todd Clifton tries to portray that act as foolish and some kind of a kind of resignation that they cannot even have what they want in their own self, or they cannot even pursue their own vision. They can only be fulfilled by serving the white men. So he thinks it's slavery anyway, irrespective of what you do for the white men. So that's the idea of the Sambo dolls. And we saw his fatal end. He was killed by a police officer that tried to arrest him without warrant for selling Sambo dolls that, preached the idea that I just explained. All right. Now, we also have the character of Ras the Exhorter. Ras the Exhorter is a stout, flamboyant character, angry man with flair for public agitation. So he's an activist. He likes to fight for the right of the people. Ras represents the black nationalist movement, which advocates the violent overthrow of white supremacy. Edison seems to use him to comment on the black nationalist leader, Marcus Garvey, I'm sure you remember, who believed that blacks would never achieve freedom in the white society. So a maverick, Ras frequently opposes the Brotherhood, and the narrator often violently incites riot in Harlem. Now, one important thing you must know as a significance of Ras is that Ras is portrayed as an element of disruption to the idea of the Brotherhood. But Ras, just like its name suggests, does not like to play around with the truth. He knows what the idea of the white men are. He knows that they are not true to the ideas. So he did not try to cut corners, probably to try to talk to one of them. He decides to make it open, make it an open crusade to fight the ideas of the Brotherhood. So anytime he sees any one of them around, he tries to fight them, tries to destroy them. As a matter of fact, during a particular conference, he gathered crowd, to attack and disrupt the people. The organizers, especially the organizers of the conference that was, purported to be helping the blacks or the people in Harlem. And we also saw at a point in time where he came in contact with Todd Clifton and he nearly killed him. But the only reason he spared Todd Clifton was because he discovered by his own way that Todd Clifton does not really align or does not really like the idea of the Brotherhood. Okay? So he spares his life. Then we have this strange character, Reinhardt, a surreal figure who never appears in the book except by reputation. Reinhardt possesses a seemingly infinite number of identities. Among them include pimp, the bookie, and a preacher who speaks on the subject of invisibility. Now, the Reinhardt character is not a physical character. As a matter of fact, the first time we hear of him was when the narrator, the main character or the protagonist of this text, dresses like Reinhardt. He wore a glass, wore a hat, and he looked camouflaged. And then he continued to, he was walking along the street and people saw him. When they saw him, they thought it was Reinhardt. And that was where we heard the first Reinhardt. Reinhardt used to be a particular character or a person in Harlem that dresses exactly this way, like you can see on the screen, with hat and with, glasses. He has different characters. At a point in time, he was known as a preacher. And his major preaching was basically for the fact that we should not be racist in our ideas. We should embrace each other. We should embrace one another. Those are his preachings. And that the more we segregate, the more we create invisibility for ourselves. So he thinks that even the white men themselves are invisible because they have refused to allow other people or accommodate other people's nature, race, and policies. Okay? So Reinhardt has this three-dimensional nature which makes him an uncertain figure. No one knows exactly who he is. And when the narrator discovers that is the way people saw him, he was happy. Because he gave him a sense of identity. He gave him a sense of feeling that, wow, I can even live freely and not be disturbed because no one can even identify me. They think I am Reinhardt. That brought us seriously on the theme of identity. All right, let's look at another character, Dr. Blesso. I talked about him briefly when I was talking about the Black College. He's the president at the Narrators College. Dr. Blesso proves selfish, ambitious, and treacherous. He's a black man who puts on a mask of civility to the white community. Very tricky and dangerous man. All he cares about is his ambition and his reputation with the white men and all the trustees, the board of trustees at the college, the Black College. And we saw this manifestly when he was sure, he knew that the narrator was not the cause of Mr. Norton's problem. After Mr. Norton passed out, he continues to blame him and shout at him. And he was really angry. I thought he was going to stop there. He pretended as though he was going to beg Mr. Norton on his behalf. But he himself had his own plan, his wicked plan, which was to pretend as though he had graduated the narrator and then gives him a letter of recommendation. And the content of the letter was that his he's a troublesome boy, keep the nigger running, which means that he has, defamed him already in that letter. So there was nowhere he could get a job from. Very bad, very wicked in his disposition and his activities. All right. So we also have Mr. Norton, one of the wealthy white trustees at the Narrators College. I've talked about Mr. Norton a number of times, mentioned him. Mr. Norton is a narcissist man who treats the narrator as a tally on his soul card, that is as proof that he is liberal-minded and philanthropic. Now, what he did, when he got to the black college, he paid a visit sometime, and when he saw the narrator, he asked if he could drive, and then he asked that the narrator should drive him. Now, this contrasts what we would have seen in Ralph Ellison's, August Wilson's Fences, where the blacks are not allowed to drive. And that was one of the major conflicts in the play. But now, in Invisible Man, we see that Mr. Norton asks the narrator, which is a black man, to drive him instead of a white person, because they do not believe that the black men are, true in their identity. They cannot entrust their lives in the hands of a black man. And now we are seeing that the simple reason is because he wanted to show that he is philanthropic, not because he had any level of liberality or empathy, even though that was what he was portrayed to have. He just wanted to show that he is philanthropic in his disposition, in his ideas, and then he allows him to drive. But unfortunately, the narrator drives him to a particular bar called the Golden Day. And just like I mentioned earlier, there was a riot, serious crisis, and he could not bear what was coming at him, and he fell and fainted. And by fainting there, another idea was created of the weakness of the white man because they have failed to accept other race, the people of other race, especially the blacks. Okay, the veteran commented on it. Right? We're going to see that very soon. Okay, and then he was taken back to the Golden Day. Now, even at that, despite what happened to him, Mr. Norton still thinks that the narrator is not the problem. He's not at fault, that he should be freed. But really, that was not what he wanted, because he just wanted to show that he was liberal in his own idea. Now, we also have another character, Reverend Omahe Babi. He's a preacher from Chicago who visits the Narrators College. Reverend Babi's fervent praise of the founder's vision strikes an inadvertently ironic note, because he himself is blind. And with Babi's first name, Ellison makes a reference to the Greek poet Homer. I'm sure you know about the Iliad. Another blind orator who praised great heroes in his epic poems. Ellison uses Babi to satirize the college's desire to transform the founder into a similarly mythic hero. Now, of course, Omar Babi was a preacher, and on his visit, he tries to, make people understand what we should have, what we should know, what we should do, and how we should, flow in amongst ourselves as humans generally. And, it was more or less like a way of satire by preaching against evil in the black college. He tries to show that what we are doing or whatever we do still later tells on us. So he's an ironic character, actually. He was supposed to come and, advance the policies of the black college, but he was there to even preach against the evil that goes on there. All right? So we also have the veteran and institutionalized black man who makes bitterly insightful remarks about the race relations. As a matter of fact, he said specifically that the people of the whites or people in the north are blind. They are blind men. Claiming to be a graduate of the Narrators College the veteran tries to expose the pitfalls of the school's ideology. His bold candor angers both the narrator and Mr. Nothing. The veteran exposes their blindness and hypocrisy and points out the sinister nature of their relationship. So, in terms of speech and oratory, the veteran was the agent of criticism of the white man's hypocrisy and evils. Okay? And then we have another important character, which is Mary. She's a serene and motherly black woman with whom the narrator stays after learning that the man's house has been banned or has been declared out of bounds for him. Now, Mary treats him kindly and even lets him stay in her house for free. She nurtures his black identity and urges him to become active in the fight for racial equality. When the narrator leaves the paint factory, because of the explosion, he passed out and he was rushed to the hospital. And when he got to the hospital, he was treated. When he got out of the hospital, he still staggered on the road and fell and fainted. People gathered, among which is Mary Rambo. Now, Mary Rambo was there and tried to tell others to go back. She was even saying that, do you want to suffocate him? Just leave. Now, that was the first thing that she did that showed us that she was a very caring and kind woman, and then carried, asked people to help carry the narrator to her house. She took care of the narrator, she fed him, helped him. She even asked him to, if he cannot find somewhere to stay, that he will come and you get an apartment in a place and you will not have to pay much. And even when the narrator comes back and stays at a place and could not even meet the rent, she still allows him to stay. And that shows the level of kindness that he is. But the important thing to know here is that she's a black woman. In contrast with Mr. Bledsoe, she celebrates the life of the black. She loves the identity of the black. And she treats everyone equally as possible. She did not stop there. Her significance continued when she helps the narrator to understand that he could pursue his vision and create a new identity for himself. Okay? And he says that I trust your race. I trust what you are looking for. It will bring credit to you. Those are our exact words. It will bring credit. He encourages the narrator. But unfortunately, we saw that the narrator, when he got into the Brotherhood, came back and did bad. Because he was still staying in that house while he was in the Brotherhood. But because of the Brotherhood's ideology, he changed. He began to see the house as a poverty-stricken house. He says the garbage is smelling. He said the tank or the septic tank is beginning to smell. The pipes are rotting. He began to complain a lot, and even now started seeing Mary Rambo as a dirty woman. And that I'm sure that the novelist tried to show us the power of sinking into the ideas of the whites during that period, during the 1950s. Okay, and you need to know that she's an agent of racial equality. That's very important because we're going to look at her later. And then we also have Sybil, a white woman whom the narrator attempts to use to find out information about the Brotherhood. Don't forget that Sybil turned against him now. Instead, he uses the narrator to act out her own fantasy of being raped by a savage black man. He calls the narrator a savage. Okay, now let's look at a question together. This 2024 question that says, comment on the character and role of Mary in the novel. Comment on the character and role of Mary in the novel. Now, when you're faced with such a question, of course, the first things to do. Don't forget to just tell us a bit about the story, then give us the themes that are related to the story. okay, or to the question that is that has been presented. And then after doing your introduction, you go ahead to do what I call character identification. You identify the character in the question. Now, this question on its own is a question that asks you to comment on a character, which means you're already going to be doing a character identification. However, it is good that you mention one other character that is related to Mary Rambo. It's very important. So that will serve as your character identification. So of course, you should be able to talk about the narrator as a character. You have identified the narrator and tell us how the narrator is related to Mary Rambo. Then you go ahead to now mention various places or various areas by which Mary Rambo has contributed to the development of the plot. Of course, after you have identified the narrator, you have told us who Mary Rambo is, then you now pick some of the things that she did and what it meant or what it meant. The first thing was to help the narrator. That would be in a separate paragraph. Starting from when he fainted, to when he got to the house, to how he treated him, to make sure that he's well, how he fed him. That shows kindness. Okay? And then you also have the issue of helping him to understand his identity. That's another part of the story. And how she's an agent of racial equality. So these ideas can be split into different paragraphs, and then you can now conclude by expressing what the novelist tries to preach using that character or introducing the character of Mary Rambo. All right. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions or comments, you can reach us on the social media handle displayed on the screen.